This is Support is Sexy, episode 447, with Michelle Green, owner of the Business of Baking. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I bring you inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and lessons to help you take your business to the next level. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm super excited to have you here. You know, it just would not be the same without you. And if you are a woman entrepreneur, a creative, a coach, anyone in business, and you want to get your message out there in the world, I'm telling you, you must consider podcast guesting. Now, if you haven't done it before, or you feel you need a refresher, or you want to know what it's all about, why I think it's such a big deal, download my free gift on how to be an unforgettable podcast guest at girlonpodcastgift.com. That's girlonpodcastgift.com. Let me show you how to be an unforgettable podcast guest, what it can do for your business, and how to get invited back again and again. Now, I'm super excited about our guest today, Michelle Green. Michelle is the owner of the Business of Baking. And I love Michelle's story because she talks about, of course, her journey going to culinary school, becoming a pastry chef, opening her own cake business. But so much of the advice and the inspiration that she gives in this episode is relative to you, no matter what your business is. So some of the things that she talks about is creating multiple streams of revenue. And I don't know if you've noticed this coming up more and more lately. You know, I speak about it all the time. 7 streams of revenue for your business, at least. Try to have 7 different ways you can do that. I know that might be tough in the beginning to think about what those things are. Well, in this episode, Michelle has a great example of her own experience of doing this in her caking business and how she went about doing it. So make sure you listen out to that and this idea of insourcing what you outsource. She also talks about learning how to make important decisions for yourself, courageous decisions for yourself, learning how to turn her competitors into her customers, which was part of creating those multiple streams of revenue. So listen out for that as well. And she talks about how she eventually sold her business, not looking back, and doing the other things that she wanted to do to help other entrepreneurs. So your business can go through various stages, look a lot of different ways. It's about your vision, not what everyone else says, as you'll hear Michelle and I talk about in this episode. All right, so I know you're going to enjoy this. So without further ado, Michelle Green. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining us for an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so excited to have you here.
My pleasure, Elayne. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Now, our first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I was better at that. I wasn't making stuff.
That you were better at?
Yeah, I was better at building things than I was at making things. So I owned a custom cake business. And while I loved it and I was good at it, what really kind of lit my fire up from the inside was the owning and managing of that business, not the product that business created. And so it's not like I woke up one morning and I went, oh, you know what? This dawned on me. It's just that it was a realization over time that when I was getting up to go to the shop in the morning, the part I was excited about wasn't making the product. It was about the employees, and it was about, calling the accountant, and it was about, telling people what my dreams were for this business and then making those things happen and telling other people about how to run it. So it was kind of a realization over time. I got into being an entrepreneur because of the product and pretty quickly realized the product was not the thing, or at least not the thing for me.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Thank you for sharing that, because I was listening to, of course, a podcast the other day. I can't remember. I think it was maybe Tony Robbins, and the founder of Guilt was on there, Alexandra. I can't remember her last name right now. But anyway, she was mentioning that she discovered, sort of like you, she discovered the part of business that she really enjoyed, or entrepreneurship, was the launching. the launching part of it. The running day to day and those kind of things weren't necessarily her thing. I'm paraphrasing. But some people like the launch part of the business. So they just launch and then they move on to another business or help other businesses launch. Other people like you like the day to day part of it. Other people are most excited about the product. So for everyone listening to catch that it doesn't have to be the all encompassing parts of entrepreneurship that you love, right? Finding the parts of it that resonate with you as an individual.
Oh, 100%. And I think also sometimes you don't know what you like until you've tried it.
That's right.
And then you go, in your head, you're like, I'm going to love doing this. And then you do it and you're like, actually, I don't love doing this.
Exactly. I do it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's actually how I went along the path of outsourcing things in my business too. When you start your life as an entrepreneur, you're usually bootstrapping, don't know what you're doing and have no money to do it. So you do all the things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I actually learned that outsourcing was both about giving work to other people who were better at doing what I did and also about giving them the parts I didn't love.
That's right. I just did that too. Oh, Michelle, this is starting off very well. I just went through that. I did an episode talking about the resistance I had to doing it because as a solopreneur, when you have your business and you work so hard for a year or two, it's kind of, there's a part of me that was like, I don't know, is not even are the people ready? Is my business ready for me to hand this over? Yes, it was. But like you said, this idea of delegating and bringing, well, we're all about support around here, but bringing other people in to support you and delegating the things that you either don't like or you're not the best at.
Oh, yeah. I've learned to live my business life as just because I can doesn't mean I should. Just because I can doesn't mean I have to. I mean, yes, I'm capable of updating my social media 20 times a day, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best use of my time.
Right.
And if I can hire a VA to do that for me, it's double win, right? The marketing is getting out there. She's doing something she's great at. And by my business supporting her business, that's two families that are benefiting.
That's right. Now, tell us your background and where you grew up. I know you're in Australia now. Thank you for joining us from Australia, but tell us your background.
So I grew up in Los Angeles, California. My parents were immigrants to the United States. And I have to say that now as an adult, I can appreciate that really informed my life because I saw their example as immigrants showing, that typical story, showing up with like no money and kind of working their way up. And I have to say that my dad was an unbelievable entrepreneur. He owned his own law firm and my mom worked with him, but he was also this incurable entrepreneur. He invested in crazy stuff. He invented crazy stuff. He had business ideas like flying out of his ears, and most of which he actually pursued, some of which he didn't, lots of which were spectacular failures. But I actually learned a lot about all of that. And ironically, I remember growing up and thinking, I'm never running my own business because my parents did it. And so that's all they talked about all the time at dinner. And as kids, we used to get really sick of it. Like, don't you guys have anything else to talk about,
Right.
Or on the weekend, they'd be running to the office, or all of us as summer jobs worked, filing in their office or whatever. And as much as they taught me a lot in that time, and they did at the time, it did not seem appealing at all. But there you go. So yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles and I went to college in the United States as well. But I did a 1-year study abroad here in Australia. And it is one of the most beautiful places on earth.
I've heard.
From a cultural point of view, not just the way it looks. And I ended up meeting my partner here and choosing to migrate here too. So I also became an immigrant.
Yeah, and your parents are immigrants from
Israel.
From Israel, okay. And then you decided to, once you went to Australia, you thought, this is where I belong for right now. And for the long term, you've been there since, right?
Yeah, I've been here. I realized this the other day, like scarily enough, Elayne, I've been here half my life.
Wow. So you kind of like it.
Yeah. Seems to be working out so far.
Work it out. So now you said when you were younger and observing your parents or hearing them constantly talk about entrepreneurship, you didn't think you were going to go into owning your own business. What did you think you were going to do? What did you study in school?
Oh my gosh, the life that I have is completely not the life I thought I would have. I should say, I always listen to a podcast and I read books about entrepreneurs. And I don't know if this is you, Elayne, but you know how you hear about how like they were the kids selling like stickers on the bus for $1, and they were the kids with the lemonade stand, and they were the kids who were, making money from 6 years old. This was not me at all. Mm-hmm. Zero, zip, zilch, nada. I never would have said I was going to own my own business. So as a young person, I was actually really interested, not in business at all, but in the humanities. I loved to write and I loved to read and I loved the creative arts. And that was very much my focus. But I've also been I recently admitted this to my teenage daughter, actually, that as a young person, I was probably the laziest person you ever met. I mean, really, I just, you know what? I had the, good fortune to be relatively naturally clever, which is great. But stupidly, I decided that this meant I had to put in no effort. So I really skated my way through school and high school and even college because, I don't know, there was cooler stuff I wanted to do or other things that were more interesting to me, travel or reading cool books or whatever. And so I never had this passion and drive and motivation. All the things I have now, I didn't have then at all. Zero. I had to literally admit to my teenage daughter that while I think her effort at school is amazing, I was never like that.
And what was her response in hearing that? Because sometimes our kids think, well, I don't know necessarily. I don't have children, so I can't say. But I would imagine they think when you're telling them how they should do this or that, if that's the relationship that you have, they're thinking, oh, you must have been great in school. Or you must have been this. But to hear you be like, actually, I wasn't that great. Wasn't that
You know what? It was a great conversation because she has an unbelievable work ethic. She works unbelievably hard. And I said to her, the irony here is that I gave birth to a child who is super highly motivated and like super, just wanting to do well and whatever. And I said to her, but you should know that while I'm super proud of your effort and you're clearly getting the results you want, the truth of the matter is what happens now isn't really a reflection of what happens in the rest of your life. It's not. I think also teenagers are led to believe that the choices they make in high school and in college inform their lives. And that was true. In my generation, that was true. But in their generation, the teenagers of today, they're probably going to have multiple jobs, most of which don't even exist yet.
Right. That's true. That's the thing. Most of them don't even exist yet. And I don't even know how you train or educate children today for the jobs that don't exist. But things are changing so fast. Just as you said, most of the jobs don't exist yet.
Absolutely. So the end of my discussion with her was, I'm not telling you to be lazy. That's not I'm not.
The moral of the story is
it was right. The moral of the story was, absolutely go for what you want and put in the effort and, make it all happen. But if the exact path you're after doesn't exactly fall in line the way you want it to, that's not necessarily the end of the world.
Now, you fell in love with baking and decorating cakes when you were a teenager at 16, right? From what I read.
Yeah, 100% true. Which, there you go. I was spending more time doing that than I was studying.
Yeah, so tell us about that moment.
Do you know what? I've always been a foodie. And I remember as a kid, hilariously, I remember as a kid coming home and making, my parents worked, right? So I had to fend for myself. And, most kids would probably come home and make I don't know, a bologna sandwich or like a handful of crackers or something. And I was sauteing mushrooms in butter on toast. In fact,
is this experimenting or something you saw on television?
You know what? There was no cooking shows then. It was just, I don't know, if I throw this in a pan, what's going to happen? Ooh, that's pretty delicious. Seriously, I used to eat all kinds of weird stuff because it was around. And so I tried it. And most of the time it was great. Some of the time it was terrible. But bizarrely, my parents, neither of them are cooks, my mom especially, not into cooking or baking at all. She often jokes that I got some strange genetics from several generations back because I love baking and decorating. But we owned a cake decorating book. To this day, my mother claims she has no idea where that book came from. So we owned this cake decorating book, and I used to look at the pictures all the time and think it was the coolest thing that people could take something as simple and basic as flour and butter and turn it into this beautiful cake. In fact, I remember on the cover, there was a cake that was a hot air balloon. And all it was a square cake with a basket weave piping. And then they used literally sticks and a real balloon to make it into this hot air balloon. Now as a cake decorator, I could make that balloon out of cake as well. And I could make it far more complex. But at the time it was like, wow, if all I'm doing is throwing some mushrooms and butter in a pan and getting some cool thing, if I then went to this next, that's art. And I absolutely thought it was the coolest thing ever. But again, it was experimentation. Went to my local supermarket, bought all those tubes of icing, like the gel and the, back when we were younger, there was, the letters made out of sugar. They probably still sell those, actually. All that random stuff and, Betty Crocker icing. And I just tried stuff and cool things came out most of the time. And sometimes awful things came out. But you know what the cool part about cake that looks terrible is? It still tastes good.
Exactly. I'd rather it look terrible and taste good than the opposite, right? Look beautiful.
Yeah.
And I've been at weddings or events and you taste it and you're like, oh my God, this was so pretty and it tastes so bad.
Right. So, even when I made mistakes, it was still all right.
That's right.
time. So I loved cake decorating, but I grew up in a family that culturally that was not an acceptable career at all. If I'd said to my parents at that age, I want to be a chef or I want to be a cake decorator, they would have looked at me like, there is no way, honey. I don't think so.
What was their expectation, do you think? Since they were entrepreneurs too, were they thinking some other kind of business, or did they want you to get a quote unquote safe job?
Oh, they desperately wanted me to be a doctor, like desperately. I don't know if that's like a Jewish parent thing or what, but they wanted me to be a doctor. And it was kind of clear, really, culturally, that my choices were like doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer. It was not, even though my dad in particular was an entrepreneur, he was ultimately a lawyer. That was his real job, right? And he owned his own practice and whatever. All the other stuff, I think, honestly, he would have described all those other things as like hobbies. I don't think he would have looked at his interest in other things as real potential careers. I think he would have just thought, yeah, my job is I'm a lawyer and my hobby is that I like to dabble in inventing random stuff and investing in random businesses and whatever. He would have seen that as a hobby for sure. In fact, one of the stories I tell about my dad is that up until the day he died, he used to call me on the phone, and we'd have chats and stuff. And every conversation started with the question, have you got a real job yet?
Even after you were successful in your business?
Oh, yeah. Even after I had employees.
I love it.
Oh, all of that. Even after I was teaching internationally, everything.
You got a real when job is this yet? Hobby going to end, right? When are you going to become a lawyer or a doctor?
Absolutely. I just think it just didn't, it's a different culture. They honor different things differently. And I think this idea of standing there making cake, they were like, what?
So now with me, that's like my father, even though I'm definitely older, I don't have to, ask my parents to do certain things. But still, when you try to explain to them what you're doing, when you say online entrepreneur, they're like, what are you even talking about? I don't even try to explain it. It's just, like, you have to show physical money? Things. Exactly.
How do you make money from that? And it's like, my mom still, she kind of gets it, but not really.
Right. But just like, are you okay? Okay, fine. That's the
good. You don't need money from me and a place to live. We're good.
We're good. So for you then, even though you were 16 or 17 at the time, and as you said, your parents were thinking this is just a hobby, but for you, did you feel like this is more than a hobby? Or did you think the same?
Not at that stage, because I wasn't really allowed to think like that. I don't think that ever crossed my mind that could be an option. And in fact, it wasn't until I was much, much older that I thought about doing it as a career, because it's actually quite hilarious. It's my dad's fault in a way, because we had a conversation when I was in my mid-20s. I probably, the kids were 2, so I probably would have been about 26, 27. And up until that point, I had been doing all kinds of other careers. I had all kinds of other things going on. I had given birth to my kids. I was working, but I was kind of working. Not dead-end jobs, but I was working at stuff that just wasn't all that exciting, really. I was good at it, but it wasn't all that interesting. And my father said to me, I think you need to find a career. I think you need to find a calling. And I was like, what? Seriously? And he ended up saying to me, I don't think I've ever told anybody this story. He ended up saying to me, this is crazy. He ended up saying to me, Mom and I want to contribute to you guys buying a house, because we had toddler triplets at the time. So he said, Mom and I want to contribute to you buying a house, which again is very common in a Jewish Israeli household. And he said, but the deal is that we're not going to do it unless you find a real career. And he said, so I'm going to give you 3 months to find a real career. And if you find one and you pursue it, then cool, we'll help you guys buy a house. And if not, not.
Wow. So no pressure.
Right. And we were living in a teeny tiny little rented house with 3 babies. And we knew we needed to buy a house, but we were like, wow, whatever, he wasn't planning. It wasn't like he was going to give me $1 jillion. It wasn't like that, but whatever contribution was going to be a good one.
Right.
But I outsmarted him in that I said, can it be any career? And he said, yep, anything at all, but you have to be on the path to that career, whatever it is. And I said, are you sure, Dad? Like, this is the rules, anything at all. And he went, yeah, anything at all. And I was like, okay. And so in a way, he gave me the freedom to think about that. If I could do anything I wanted, what would I do? And the answer I kept coming back to was, actually, I would totally go to culinary school and become a pastry chef and make cake all the time. And by that time, I had done just like a hobby class, like a Wilton level 1 buttercream class that some friends had given me as a gift. and I loved it, and it was so fun. And I thought, he just gave me the freedom to choose anything. And not only did he give me the freedom to choose anything, but he also offered me essentially a reward for choosing anything.
Right.
So I walked away from that conversation thinking, okay, hang on a second. He said I can do anything. Well, that means I don't have to be a doctor, lawyer, whatever. And so I went away and applied to culinary school, and the rest is history. And when I went back to him 3 months later and said, okay, Dad, I did it. I'm enrolled in culinary school. This is my plan. I want to do this. I want to open this business. I want to blah, 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 blah. He had to make good on his promise.
Did he? Did he?
Which he did.
Yes.
Yeah.
The suspense is killing me. Okay, good.
Yeah. He made good on his promise. But it was very grudgingly, by the way. It was very, very, very grudgingly, and he put it off for ages and tried not to pay up, and it was a kind of a long thing. Because he was kind of pissed. Like, he was kind of like, this was meant to send you to
but that's not what I meant, right?
Yeah, I think he was like, oh crap, my plan just like backfired on me. You were supposed to go to medical school. What do you mean you're playing with cake all day?
Right.
But the deal was the deal, so it worked. And so the rest is history. But he then still asked me every day, when are you gonna get a real job? This is a real job.
When are you going to get a real job? Thank you so much for sharing that story, especially since you said you don't share it often or haven't shared it.
You know what? I don't think I've told anyone that story, and certainly not publicly. It's such a good example of how I never really thought about the fact that he really did give me both the freedom and the motivation.
I love that too, because I think for everyone listening, you might not have a parent saying, make this decision. And even though you went a different path, so you didn't do exactly what he said, you did, but not exactly what he was thinking. But just for all of us, though, that are held back by maybe thinking that we have to make this choice or that choice, your dad in this case gave you that freedom or permission. But for the women listening, I would love for you to take a moment to think about how can you give yourself that permission to make that choice that might not be what everybody else is thinking, right? Or what everyone else wants you to do or thinks you should do, or what all the other shoulds that we put on ourselves. Giving
Elayne, I'm so glad you said that, because now in thinking about this, he gave me that first sense was my own.
Right. Exactly.
So sure, he opened that first door, right? But I had to choose to walk through it.
Right.
And every decision I made after that came from me. That didn't come from him or anyone else or any other male or female. So, and interestingly, I knew what he meant. Right. I'm not stupid. I knew. I knew he wanted me to do that.
Well, that's why you clarified. You were asking clarifying questions like, so anything? I can do anything. So clearly you knew. I know what you mean.
Yeah, I knew, right?
Yeah, and but so that freedom to make the choice. But you still, even though, you still made the courageous choice.
100%. 100%. And the truth is, I could have chosen either way I was going to get what I wanted, right? So why not be a little bit brave?
So what was it like then after? So culinary school was in, not Australia, that was in London. Was that in London?
No. Culinary school was here in Australia.
It was in Australia.
I went to culinary school when my babies were 2 years old. So I'm a mom.
Triplets,
yeah.
Oh my
So they were 2 years old and I went to culinary school. But that entire time that I was in culinary school, I was making cake for family and friends for basically no money. And I maintained my administration job too. So I was making cake for people in my office and that whole thing.
And then at what point did you decide to open up your own shop?
Well, you know what? Because I had the kids and because I guess I had my parents' voice in my head to a degree, I never was one of those people who was like, yep, I'm going to shut the doors or open the doors tomorrow. I never took that leap. I was not like that. I'm still not like that. As much as I am brave and I make crazy decisions, I didn't feel it was responsible to just open the doors. So I decided that what I needed was some experience first. So I went out and I got a lot of chef jobs as a pastry chef, working at 3:00 in the morning and, oh my gosh, doing crazy stuff and being bullied and doing all sorts of things that people in hospitality jobs do, cursing a lot and working ridiculous hours and swallowing anti-inflammatories like they were M&Ms and all this kind of. I led this because being working in hospitality, particularly in pastry, is really hard on your body. So I led this crazy life, but I wanted to learn how other people did it. I didn't feel I knew enough to run my own business. But the entire time I was doing that, I was running my own business. I just wouldn't have called it that. So I would make a cake for family, or I'd make a cake for friends, or I'd make cookies for somebody, and I would charge them, cash in hand, basically nothing. My home kitchen was not registered. But as time went on, I realized that I loved that so much more than I loved working for other people. And I am also a terrible employee. I'm a bad employee. Not because I'm, well, kind of, not because I'm like lazy or have a bad work ethic. It's not that. It's that I question everything, and nothing irritates a boss more than somebody who questions everything. I wasn't questioning it as in a negative way. I would just say, oh, how can we do it this way? And they'd explain it, and they'd say, oh, what if we did it that way? It might go a little faster, or this is cool, or we should try this. Like, that ideas woman thing, you can't get rid of it, even if you want to. And it just irritates bosses. They want you to do what they tell you to do and keep your mouth shut. And I was incapable of that. And so particularly with women, I'd run into a lot of situations at work where they'd get really frustrated and irritated by my question asking, or they'd be intimidated by the fact that I clearly was a quick study. I could pick stuff up pretty quickly. Something that took them however long to figure out, I could figure out in a shorter amount of time, and it would just irritate people. And so I'm a crappy employee because I'm constantly questioning, I'm constantly asking, and I'm constantly kind of coming up against authority like, I can do this. Why can't I do this? We should do this. I can do this. I don't have no filter. It's all that. So I realized over time, here I am standing in a kitchen at 3:00 in the morning, rolling 10,000 croissants or whatever it is. I could be at home making this money for myself and probably doing better and not having to answer to anybody else's timeline. I don't believe in can't. So anybody who told me I couldn't do something, it just irritated me.
And you figured out how you could do it. How to turn it into a can. So was it a home-based business first then? Did you decide, how many years did you do sort of apprentice or working in other shops before you decided that move?
So I worked as a pastry chef or as a chef. Oh my God, I didn't even know how many years, maybe 7. It was a long time. And what I did was I built my business as I went along. So I wasn't willing to take that leap. I really wasn't. And financially, I was too afraid to do so. So what I did was I started making cake for family and friends from home, and did that for quite a while. And I realized also quickly that that was not allowed in my municipality. So you can't actually run a food business from home where I live. I did try, and it didn't work. So over time, I started looking for commercial kitchens. And eventually I rented a commercial kitchen space. It was tiny. Oh my God, it was so little. Like practically, I could stretch my arms out and reach all 4 walls. It was like this tiny little space. And I didn't have the money. I had the money for the first month's rent, but not the second month's rent. And I worked as a chef to maintain our life, So I would just chef less and cake more as time went on. And so over the years, I went from working as a chef Monday to Friday and then doing cake Saturday, Sunday, to then taking Fridays off and working as a chef, Monday to Thursday, and then cake Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But for many, many years, I worked 7 days a week. It just was a matter of some of those days were for myself and some of those days were for somebody else until I could afford to finally leap. And again, it was somebody else pushing me out the door. I had this tiny commercial kitchen. And business was going crazy. I mean, genuinely crazy. And I still chefed in a good way. And I still chefed 3 days a week, which honestly, I didn't need to at that point, but fear was keeping me from cutting that final tie. And I ended up realizing that I had to move out of that premises because it was just so small. I just couldn't make it work. It was just so tiny. We would spend, an hour decorating a cake and then 2 hours trying to figure out where the heck we were going to store it until the customer came the next day to pick it up. And the landlord rent increased me by something like 60%, like some crazy, I can't remember exactly now, but some insane amount. And I just thought, but if he increases it by that much and I can afford that, I can afford more space.
Right. He might have increased it because he saw you were doing so well in your business, which is not
right. Probably. And he gave me no notice, and it ended up with lawyers. It was all a big mess. And I was like, this is the sign. So I went out and I found a premises that was 5 times the size of my old one. And I it had a high street frontage, and I opened a teaching kitchen where we could teach other people how to cake decorate. And I added 5 more income streams to the business. And I basically just, boom, went from this, overrun little tiny kitchen to this beautiful dream shop front that existed in my head. And I made it happen in real life. So it was only then that I stopped working for other people.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love to, like you said, it was another sort of push and you looking around and realizing, okay, well, this is how I can make this happen. Or I don't like using that phrasing, make this happen. This is how we can move to the next level with this. Moving from that small kitchen into the bigger space, giving yourself to do that.
Absolutely. And I think also acknowledging that the stories you hear online, on podcasts, in books, where people just took this massive leap and, were living off $1 and then their product went viral. Like, I think that happens, but that happens so rarely.
Right. It's the exception, not the rule, right?
Absolutely. And people ask me all the time, when should I quit my business and when should I take the leap and when should I just throw everything at it? And look, for some people that works great and that's how they need to operate. For me, I didn't feel that that was something I'd be comfortable doing. Given that I had the responsibility of children and a mortgage and whatever, a dog and whatever else was going on, I didn't feel I could do that. I didn't feel I wanted to do that. The stress and pressure of that for me was not appealing at all. I was much better off basically slowly working my way out of one and into another. And there are times now where I think maybe I should have just taken the leap. Maybe I should have just invested every dollar. And then I'm like, no, but that wouldn't have worked for me. Exactly. It still doesn't work for me. It's like to this day, that's not how I operate.
Right. And thank you for saying that, because I think sometimes some of us beat ourselves up when we hear, I always say no beat ups, but some of us do, myself included. You see, or you hear the story, you don't know if that's actually how it happened, but you hear the story, as you said, of how someone seemingly, launched this thing and it was $1 million launch and then they did this and they did that, or they just took the leap and left their job. And you might be in your current job or just starting in your business or in any stage thinking, well, maybe I should do that, or why didn't I do that, or this is what's wrong. I think it's different for everyone. Like you said, people ask you all the time, when should I leave? What's your circumstance? What's your money like? What are you trying to do? There's so many other questions to ask, I think, before you get to that point. And I always tell people, I feel like I did that years ago with leaving a great job in New York, thinking I'm just going to work on my business without even knowing what exactly is this business going to be. There are so many other questions I should have asked, but I talk about making things an either or choice, Michelle, as opposed to a both and. And sometimes, most times, it can be a both and we're stressing ourselves making it an either or choice.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100%. It's funny. I think that story, one thing we forget about things going viral is that viruses, from a medical point of view, not common and also not positive.
Right. Exactly. So true.
Nobody wants to get a virus. Hello. And also, it's not every disease is a virus, right? And so yet we now are in a culture where going viral is a positive thing.
Right. People paid tons of money to tell you how they can help you go viral. It's it's funny. So it makes no sense. So one of the things you mentioned while you were telling us the story is that once you made that transition, you also created 5 other revenue streams. Can you share some of that with us for anyone who owns a bakery or is in that sort of space and business and might not be thinking that way?
Oh, sure. I don't think it just applies to bakeries. I think it applies to every business. One of the things I realized early on, particularly in a product-based business and particularly in a custom product-based business, was I never wanted to be left in a situation where if my customers disappeared, my business disappeared. And also cakes are massively seasonal. Right? There's wedding season in the summer, but in the winter, things quieten down quite a lot. Even if, by the way, I didn't do very many wedding cakes. I mostly did kids' cakes and celebration cakes. But even then, people tend not to have as many parties or events in the wintertime.
Right.
So it was very seasonal. And I just kept thinking, I need to pay the rent on this place because it was a big place, right? I had to pay the rent and the electricity and the security and the pest control and the whatever, regardless of what season it is. How am I going to do that if the product I make is seasonal? So I started slowly looking at expanding my forms of income. So the first thing that I went into was, again, entirely born out of selfish necessity. I was purchasing edible images. I'm not sure if you know what that is, but you can buy like sheets of paper with pictures on them, like company logos or sports themed logos, that kind of thing. And I realized that I was paying like $25 a sheet every time I wanted to buy these. And I was like, what is it going to cost me to buy this myself? And I went out and did the research, and it was basically going to cost me about $100 to buy the printer and all the tech myself. And I was like, wow, 4 sheets in and I will have made back my money. And also if I sell these to other people, that's money I can make and I don't have to invest anything because I've already invested in this thing. So I started selling edible images to other people. The other advantage of that is you can throw those in the mailbox and post them all over the world if you need to. It's just a piece of paper, right? And then I was like, oh, what else? Now at the time, cupcake towers were very popular. You know, the like multi-tier cupcake stands.
Right.
And people were constantly asking me for those. And I was renting them from an event company. I don't remember what I was paying, but I was like, well, if I just buy one of these myself, then I can use it. And then the weekends I'm not using it, I can rent that out to other people. And so all my original choices about how am I going to make more money in this business were based on what am I outsourcing that if I insource then becomes a revenue stream. And so that's how I started that. And I just kept kind of adding more and more and more things. So eventually we sold custom cake. I sold edible images. We rented out cake stands and cupcake stands and cake pans and that sort of stuff. I ended up teaching classes myself. So I was teaching and my staff were teaching. I ended up renting out my space to other teachers. So people who were from other countries or from other cities who wanted to teach in my city would rent my space and they would teach as well. And we actually had a couple of sublet options because being a bakery, we didn't use the space and a custom bakery. We didn't use our space 7 days a week. We used it mostly at the end of the week. So at the beginning of the week, other people who made other products could come in and use our space.
Right. Very
So
smart.
there was that. Yeah. And then very funnily enough, the cake industry kind of exploded. And a girlfriend of mine came down from Sydney to teach a class. And she was explaining to me how when she doesn't bake her own cake at all, she has a local bakery do it for her. She hates baking and loves decorating. And so she's like, yep, I call them and I say, I want an 8-inch chocolate and a 7-inch vanilla and a 6-inch whatever. And she's like, who here in Melbourne does that? And I was thinking, no one in Melbourne does that. And she's like, you should start baking naked cakes for other decorators.
Right.
And I was like, baking cakes for my competitors? And she's like, look, you're going to have competitors anyway. You might as well make some money off them. I was like,
that's right.
Oh my God, you are genius.
Turn them into customers.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I did. And I used a different set of recipes so that my business still had a point of difference. And I sold naked cakes to other decorators. And that meant that even if I had a quiet few months, you know, people still have events during that time, but if I had a quiet few months over the winter, I was still selling edible images to people like moms who wanted to make a cake for their kid and throw a baseball logo on it or whatever, you know? And I was still selling naked cake to other decorators who didn't want to bake. And I was still selling, you know, renting stuff, and I could teach. I did a lot of teaching over the winter time because that's a great time. People want to come and do a cozy cupcake class or whatever. So yeah, that in the end, we ended up with 6 different forms of income, and it kept my business going.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And for, well, not that you wouldn't remember, but you told all of the stories so great, how the origin of them and how they became other revenue streams. And I love the phrase that you use, learning how to, what did you say, in-source what you currently outsource, and looking at how that could be an opportunity for your business, no matter what business you're in.
Yeah, and I think this is true, by the way. I mean, I had a product-based business, but this is true for any business. If I look at the blog and what I do now, sure, it started out as a free blog, right? Wonderful. Then it turned into a live class. Then that live class turned into a bigger live class. Then that turned into a digital class. Then that turned into a book. Then that turned into a podcast. Now it's turned into coaching and all kinds of things. But none of it was me waking up and going, yep, here's my fully formed business plan. A lot of it was trial and error. A lot of it was, I'm going to give this a try and see what happens. A lot of it was responding to what people told me they wanted.
So tell us now, at this point, you sold the whole business, right? The cake business, that is.
Yep.
So what was that? What led you to that decision? And then tell us what you are most passionate about now.
So I knew I was going to sell the cake business before I even opened the doors. And I knew that because not because I was some brilliant entrepreneur that was building to sell. It wasn't that at all. It was that I knew I had this, I can't explain why, but somewhere in my head, I had a thing about I'm not going to be standing in a kitchen when I'm 40. I don't know why I felt that. I mean, maybe it was about having a messed up back, or I don't know. I just was like, I need to be out of this by the time I'm 40.
You had a vision for yourself, and that wasn't it.
And that wasn't it. And I can't tell you, by the way, what the vision was. I didn't know then, and I still don't know that now, but for sure it wasn't that. I knew that that was a stepping stone to the next thing. So when it came time to sell the business, I was not heartbroken. I mean, I was that I missed the people and whatever, but I knew that day was coming. It happened way earlier than I thought. It happened when I was 38, but I still, people are always like, did it break your heart to sell it? I'm like, no.
No, yeah, I didn't think that at all. I was just curious about the moment and whether someone came to you and offered to buy, or if, as you mentioned, if you came to the point where you decided, I feel like now is the time.
Oh, okay. So that actually did happen. A woman that I knew, I told you that we used to try to sublet the kitchen a little bit to other businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman had tried to sublet from me, but it wasn't going to work. She owned a company that did primarily savory food. She owned a catering company.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't going to work for me. You cannot fry garlic next to chocolate. It's not a thing.
Right.
Or it shouldn't be a thing. So it wasn't going to work, but she approached me one day. I was working late and she came into the shop when I was working late, and we had a conversation, and basically she said, have you ever thought about selling? And I said, yes. And she said, how much do you want for it? And I told her, and she said, well, if I wrote you a check for that right now, would you take it? And I said, yeah, I would. And so she did. And I did.
What? It was that simple. You named your price. She wrote you a check.
Yep. Oh, she negotiated a couple grand off, but I didn't care.
Right. It was like, whatever, you're writing me a check right now. So
exactly.
So the next day, was it like, okay, I have to go in and tell everyone, because you had a staff and everything by then, right? That you
Well, the first thing I did was freak out that night. And the second thing I did, the next morning, I actually I didn't have like a business lawyer or whatever. So I actually called my accountant. I was like, this crazy thing just happened. What do I do? He's like, you need to call a lawyer. I'm like, I don't know any lawyers. Help.
Mm-hmm.
And I called this lawyer and I was like, this insane thing just happened. Like, what do I do? I had this complete panic. I called my staff. I'm like, guys, something came up. I'll be in late today. And I was so terrified that she would change her mind,
mm-hmm.
that I didn't want to tell them. I didn't want to tell anybody. I was just like, it was very scary. And I literally like get in the car and I like run to the lawyers to like sign whatever paperwork they shoved in front of my face. And it took a couple of months actually to kind of go through the process, because even though she had written me a check, right, there's still the negotiation of, what does that check include and what parts does she get and what parts, all that.
Right. You don't just walk away after you get the money, the check.
Yeah. So there was a couple of months there. So I didn't tell my staff until some time later, until I was 100% sure both that sale was going to go through, and I was 100% sure that I knew the terms of that. And I was able to say to them, my staff, this is what's going to happen from here. I didn't want there to be a situation where they felt I was just abandoning them. I mean, that just wasn't cool,
Right.
So so it took a little while, really only a couple of months, and then it was kind of all over Red Rover. And funnily enough, I did in the sale of contract, I owed them, I can't remember now, but I think it was like 6 weeks, 4 weeks or something of my time as a handover period. They ended up not needing it because I'd set up that business with procedures in place. They didn't need me.
Very good. That's a good point. Set it up so you don't have to. That's right. That's a good point.
Yeah. They called me, I think, twice, and that was it.
I mean, that's nothing compared to, I'm sure, that they thought they would need you 6 weeks. If they only called you twice, that's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
because the procedures were there and they kept my staff on board, and so they just kept going.
That's right. So
and here's crazy. Elayne, here's crazy.
Go ahead.
So I sold my business 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, middle of last year, I think it was, that company sold off the catering company and only kept the cake business going. And in January this year, they resold the cake business to someone else.
So your company has been sold 3 times now? Or
Twice
now. Oh my goodness. Wow.
It's kind of cool, right?
It is cool. And that it kept going. It's like could have been a franchise if that was ever your vision. Putting those procedures in place. So now what is it like tell us what you spend most of your time doing now with the business of baking and how you're helping. I love one of the phrases you have a course, build your profitable cake business that transforms the cake lady into the boss lady.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I do in a nutshell. Thanks. That was a good elevator pitch. Right?
Yeah, I love it.
So now I teach people how to do what I did, which is take their passion for making product and turn that into a profit. So, interestingly, over the last I'd say 9 months to a year, the focus of my business has changed a little bit. When I started the Business of Baking, it was all very practical. It was, how to write a newsletter and how to do your marketing and how to price your cakes. And I certainly still talk about all of those things. But in the last, 9 months or so, I've realized that the issue for most entrepreneurs is not the how. It's all about the mental piece of it. It's stop thinking of yourself as the cake lady and start thinking of yourself as the business owner. It's all about the mental piece. And because primarily the food industry is filled with a whole bunch of incredibly creative people, a lot of them are introverts. A lot of them deal with issues of anxiety, depression, mental health issues. It's very, very common in my industry. And if we look at entrepreneurship at large, then you have the issue of loneliness. You have the issue of feeling not only isolated because you probably work at home, but isolated because maybe you're the only one who does what they do, or maybe you have lots of competitors in your space. It's a real mental challenge, honestly. Small business ownership, and in particular online ownership, is a real mental challenge. And so I've started addressing that a lot more. So now the Business of Baking is still about the business of baking, but it has shifted to be much more about the mental business of baking as opposed to just the logistical business of baking. So I travel the world. I teach in person. I have my online class, Build Your Profitable Cake Business. I've written a book. I have a podcast, all these things. But at the heart of it, it's all about giving people the tools to go and do it themselves. And if that tool is, here's how I got out of my mojo loss, or if the tool is, here's how to get over a knock to your confidence, or if that tool is, here's how to send a newsletter, or here's how to post on social media, then great. I just want to be the one that provides the tools to get people to where they want to go. And for some people, that's going to be that their baking is a side gig. It's only ever going to be a side gig. That's all they ever want, is for it to be a pocket money business. And for some people, that is going to be the franchise. And there's lots and lots and lots of options in between those two. So whatever part I can play in getting people to where they want to go with what they make, that's my job.
Excellent. When you first started out, did you realize based on your own experience, because I love what you said about being an entrepreneur, the loneliness, the depression, all the things that we go through that a lot of people don't realize, did you realize that would be a big part of your business going into it? Or did you find that as you started talking to people that, okay, they're not just looking for procedures and how to do this and that, the personal development side really was going to be a big part of it?
Oh, it was absolutely it was absolutely a realization that came over time. And it came about because I don't do this anymore. I used to do one-on-one coaching, business coaching with people. And, they'd book a session where they wanted to, I don't know, let's say work on their pricing, and we'd have this very long discussion about pricing. And in, minute 58 of the hour, or minute 59, they would suddenly say something like, oh, I can't charge that. What will people think of me?
It's really a mental thing.
Yeah. Or, we would come up with a marketing plan. And then at minute 58 or minute 59, they'd say, Michelle, this is like an awesome plan. I don't really think I can do this. And I'd say, well, why not? And they'd say, well, because I'm not even brave enough to press publish on my website. How am I supposed to execute this marketing plan? So it was a realization that on the surface, people were asking me one thing, but the answer was far below the surface.
Right. What would you say entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
Oh, gosh, that is an excellent question. Do you know what? I think it's taught me that all the people my whole life who told me negative things about myself were wrong. So let me clarify that a little bit. I am 6 feet tall. I have been overweight my whole life, so I'm not a small person, right? I'm loud, I'm opinionated, I say what I think, and I do whatever I want, when I want, generally speaking. And my whole life, men in particular, but also other women, gave me flack for that. Oh, you're so obnoxious. Oh, you're so loud. Oh, you're so difficult. Oh, you're so pushy, negative stuff, right? Oh, you're such a ball breaker, all this kind of negative stuff. And as an entrepreneur, I've learned that all those things people used to deride me for are assets.
Right.
It's because I speak my mind and do what I want and try things, and I'm brave and I'm loud and I'm willing to ask questions and I'm willing to stand up for what I believe in, that I've been as successful as I am. So that's what I've learned. that the things people told me were negative personality traits have served me unbelievably well as an entrepreneur. If I didn't have the bravery to stand up for myself, if I didn't have the bravery to take chances, if I wasn't willing to speak up for what I believe in, if I wasn't willing to ask questions of everybody all the time, I wouldn't have gotten here.
That's right. That's such a great thing to remember too. And a lot of the things that when we talked about the personal development piece, some things from that people told us even when we were younger, or the type of person that we were or that they thought we were, those kind of things can play into your strengths as an entrepreneur. You just have to tap into it, not be afraid to go there.
People still tell me that I'm intimidating, right? Because I speak my mind and whatever. And now I think, but the people who want to hear it don't find me intimidating. They find me inspiring.
Right. That's right. That's right.
I mean, my podcast exists because the number one piece of feedback I got over and over and over again from all the other stuff I do was, Michelle, I just like to hear you talk. So whatever you say, I'm going to listen.
Yes.
And that's an incredible compliment. And I take that so much to heart. And so I was like, oh, I should start a podcast. This way more people can listen. And more people can...
Go ahead.
Sorry? Oh, I was going to say, this way more people can listen and more people get the message that you can do what you want to do. Maybe you need a helping hand. I mean, we all do, right? Support is sexy, as they say.
That's right, as they do.
But you can do it. And I want to be that voice that says you can do it. So all the people who now say to me, you're so inspirational, I love hearing you talk, whatever, are people that 10 years ago were like, you need to learn to keep your mouth shut.
Mm-hmm. You need to quiet down, right?
Mm-hmm. Pipe down. Other people want to have a say. Well,
other people need to speak up.
Yes. So I've really learned that intimidating to one person is inspiring to another.
I love that. And your podcast is called The Business of Baking, right?
Everything I do is called The Business of Baking.
Everything. I love the branding.
Well, you know what? I'd love to tell you that was some genius branding on my part. That was the lazy student in me coming back.
See, I don't want to from your childhood,
right. I did not want to come up with I tried and I failed to come up with a bunch of cool names. So I literally called everything, the podcast, the book, literally everything is called The Business of Baking. That's how unoriginal I am. And people compliment me on what a great idea that was all the time. I'm like, that wasn't a great idea.
And one of the episodes, I'll make sure I link to the podcast, but that I listened to was the worst advice I ever received, which was hilarious and brilliant. And everyone, I'll make sure I link to it so you can hear that episode of Michelle's podcast and all the others. Excellent. So in closing, Michelle, if you think over your life and career and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be and what would you say?
Oh my goodness, you're killing me with this.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I the immediate answer that springs to mind is my dad, because he, forced me out the door and pushed me to do all those things. Mm-hmm. But I think the real answer is me. Does that sound hugely egotistical? Nope. I think the real answer is me, because through all of it, I've always made the choice to ask all the questions, get all the answers, but ultimately then choose which of those answers, if any, I'm going to go with. I think you have to back yourself to some degree. I think it's important to go out and get all the advice and all the information and read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and do all those things. But at the end of it, the only person who needs to be satisfied with the direction you go is you. And many times I tried taking the advice of other people only to realize it didn't fit right. It just didn't fit right. It was like wearing somebody else's shirt. It didn't fit right. So the person I think who gave me the most support ultimately was me. I didn't always back myself. I didn't always believe in myself. I didn't always think I could make it. I didn't always have the right answer. Oh God, goodness. Plenty of times I had the wrong answer, let me tell you, and made some really stupid choices. But I've always believed that the responsibility for it always lies with me. I'm never going to blame anybody else for my good choices or my bad choices. Credit where credit is due if I got some good advice from somebody, but ultimately it's me who chose to do something.
Excellent, Michelle. I think that's a great answer. Not egotistical at all. More of us need to, I think, reflect on the ways we've showed up for ourselves, which is one of the reasons I say so many of us struggle with support. We don't know how to accept it because we don't necessarily know how to even show up for ourselves. So I love that. That was beautifully said.
Yeah. I used to say, when my kids were little, People used to drop off, because of the whole triplet thing. People used to drop off bags of like secondhand clothes, like that they'd finished using from their own kids, like on our front doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go through those clothes, and I used to think, oh, I'm not really into fringe. I'm not into purple. I'm not into orange. I don't want my kid wearing this, whatever. But if I could get one little pair of shorts or one pair of jeans or whatever out of it, then that saves me having to buy that or spend that or whatever. And so it was a win, right? I would take that on. And then if I put it on my kid and it didn't fit, that's okay. I just passed it on to somebody else who could use it. I sort of feel the same way about business advice. You gather all the things, you decide which one of them are good for you. And then if it works out that that's not good for you, you pass it on to somebody else who it'll be good for.
Excellent. Perfect. Now tell us how we can support you. Tell everyone we all know the business of baking is your everything, but tell everyone still your website, social media, how we can just get in touch with you and connect with you.
So the business of baking is my everything, but the official URL is thebizofbaking.com, because I wanted it to be nice and short and easy. And that's where you can find everything. There's links to books and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. But the best way to support me actually is, yes, read the website and do all those things. Tell someone else about it, actually. That's how you can support me. Because the truth is, we all know someone who is out there making something.
That's
don't
right.
we?
Yes.
We all know somebody who's out there. They might not be baking, but everybody's out there making something, doing something, whatever. So even if you go and you look at the Biz of Baking and go, but I'm not a baker, you probably know someone who is. So support me by sharing it with somebody else and saying to someone else, hey, I saw this and I thought it might be of use to you. You should check it out.
Excellent. Your course is on that page too, right? If not, I'll get the link from you after.
Yeah. Build Your Profitable Cake Business on there. It just closed
right?
for this time of year, but it reopens in October. But the exciting thing that's happening now is I'm just opening my live classes. So this year I'll be teaching in person, and I give free hugs for those who want them. Also, there's always...
Or just in Australia? Not that we don't want to go to Australia.
I know, right? You can all come to Australia. No, this year I'm teaching in Sydney and in Melbourne, yes, but I'm also teaching across the United States and Canada and the UK. So the website has all that stuff. But this year in the US, I'll be in Los Angeles, in Houston, in Cincinnati, in Ashburn, Virginia, just outside of DC. I'll be in Toronto. I'll be in Birmingham, the UK. I'll be in
plenty of opportunities to see you. Excellent. And ask first, but make sure you ask Michelle if you can have a hug, since she says she gives out hugs.
Yeah, I do give out hugs. If it's not your thing and I come approaching you with open arms, it's totally okay to be like, not my thing.
Not my thing, exactly.
Michelle, I have met the odd person that's like, no. And I'm like,
right. I feel like people feel more empowered to say that now. It's just like people respect boundaries. That's what we have to do.
So they should, to be honest. So they should. And I can guarantee that all my classes have really good food.
Right, there's that
selling point. But can you imagine if I taught a class and I gave like really bad brownies? That would just be bad.
Right. That's the payoff, the ultimate payoff.
Right. You come to learn and you get free bakery goods.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. This was so fun. I feel like I can talk to you forever, but I truly enjoyed it. And thank you for sharing so much of your story. You know, I'm all about it, Michelle. Sharing so much of your story. That was just beautiful. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
Everything is figure-outable.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should all tattoo this on our foreheads.
Right.
Everything is figure-outable. It genuinely is. We might not get there the way we want to get there. The original solution we found for something might not be the nicest or the prettiest or what we were expecting, but everything is figure-outable.
That's right. Excellent. Michelle, thank you so much. Hold on just a moment. All right. I hope you enjoyed that great conversation with Michelle. To find out more about her, to find out more about the business of baking, and to find out about her course and the other things that she has going on that she mentioned in this episode, the tour, if you're going to go to Australia, if you're going to meet her here, go to supportissexypodcast.com. Go to that search icon at the top and just type in Michelle. Michelle. Her show notes page will show up with the links and the resources and all the ways to get in touch with her. Supportissexypodcast.com and just search Michelle. All right. Thank you so much for being here. You know, I appreciate you. Make sure that we are connected on social media at Elayne Fluker, at supportissexy. I love connecting with you, chatting with you, and hearing from you. And until we chat next time, always remember that you deserve support. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.